Hello and welcome back to another episode of the AI Relay. I'm Andrew Signori.
And I'm Jonathan Spanos. Andy, I really wanted to ask the AI the other day, what do you think? And then I thought, like, is that a stupid thing to say? Like, is it the wrong question to ask?
It's like we're talking about different things that we could talk about this week, and you'd mentioned that, and I had actually read something similar online during the week about why that is the wrong question to ask. So I like dug into it a little bit, and oftentimes like that is the wrong question to ask, and it's the answer that we want to get to, because oftentimes like we don't know, but like why would why is really that that question of like what do you think is there's really three reasons why that's not the type of question you want to be asking.
It's not the
it's
type of question. I think that might be an
it's
interesting little thing to pull
yeah.
on, a little thread to pull on there. Like, why, first of all, like, why am I asking any questions to this thing? And honestly, like, all we've basically talking about for months is how smart it is. Smart is thinking, right? This thing is a thinking technology. So it does feel natural to say, like, what do you think?
It is. I mean, I think one of the problems is that like unless there's a whole lot of like context before that question and after that question, that it's like it's just a little bit too open ended, right? And I think it's one of the things that leads to like kind of like the three reasons why that's a bad choice
Mm,
of words, right?
mm,
And the first being that like AI's it is it's trying to be right, right? So it will hedge, right? And what I mean by hedge, it's like it will give you like maybe both sides so that it won't be wrong. And as a result,
mm.
and the end result, you get like a hedged, mushy answer, right? In the inherent, task of being accurate, it will give you like maybe a wishy-washy or mushy answer to be like, that would be good, but have you thought of this? And
Almost
and
like it's dancing around the
it will dance,
right.
right. It will dance around it in an attempt to be accurate, because if it dances around it, it's not wrong. Um,
Right. Or maybe it's
right.
it's in an attempt to not be inaccurate, right? It's just being
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I mean, you've probably like experienced that in,
I'm sure
your
we've all done that to some degree too, right? Somebody asks you a question you don't really know how to answer, and you're kind of
no
like,
one wants to be
well, I
wrong,
mean, yeah.
confidently wrong, you know? Uh, so, I think that is part of it. But I think the thing that like that kind of jumps out at me because I've experienced it the most, and it's the one I probably want to acknowledge the least, is that AI is a sycophant. Like AI, like it wants to, it wants to please you, and like it's going to tell you your ideas are amazing. Like, and like lots of times, like I'll be like, hey, what do you think of this idea? Or I'll give it my idea, and it'll be like, wow, that's an interesting take. Like nobody in the industry is doing that. Rather than to be like, hey, nobody in the industry is doing that. Like maybe you want to look at
And
why
there's a
nobody's
reason why no one is
doing
doing
that, right? And it's not because like no one is as brilliant as you, but like it's not going to say that because like it's programmed. It's sort of also programmed to mirror your excitement back at you, and
Yeah, and
it's
that's an
using
interesting
that.
part too. You say it's programmed, and to some degree, I think we need to look at this as though it's not like classical legacy computer programming, and yet there is not a deterministic, but there's like a you can influence these things the way they train them to have more, to have answers that are going to be more like this and not so much like that. So it is a programming in a way,
Right.
right?
It sort of is, right? And like in the way that they, without getting like too into the weeds, one of the ways that they sort of predict the next word in the sentence, right, is by saying, okay, I need, like, obviously there's all of the words that are known to man, right? But it says, okay, like, of what is being asked of me, like, here is a basket of words, right? and the size of that basket is like controlled by the people at Anthropic, or if you're building your own agent, you've got some control of that. Think of it as a slider, right? How large is the basket? Like how many words will be held in that giant, that basket of potential responses,
Hmm.
potential next word in the sequence.
Hmm.
And then there's like also like another value that says like, all right, from that giant collection of words, right? We're gonna take like we're really just gonna take our choice from like the top three of, or the top 30 of that basket,
And that
whenever
and
we
that
get to it.
that that begs the question of how is that ranked too? What does top 3 or top 30 mean? Is it a percentage accuracy, let's say, within the token trail? And so
So
you have a more or less accurate
the
ability to
typically like
choose words.
the smaller the basket, the like the less creative, but the more likely and accurate a response, right? So
The
like
smaller
it's sort
basket
of
being less words to choose
less
from to
words to
complete
choose
this
from.
sentence
Right. And then, then there's that other value of like, all right, how many of the basket are we gonna, rank and select from the
somehow. Right. Right.
right. And so, you can kind of kind of control the creativity of response. All right. So understanding that this is something where it's like a balance between like how creative a response, and then like of that basket of words, like which ones are we going to choose from. Um, just even understanding that should sort of shape the way that you like ask it questions, right? Because like now you understand, like asking a question of like, what do I think? Well, what do I like? If there is, even if there is some context behind it,
Hmm.
it again, like the idea that it wants to mirror your excitement, right? If you're excited about this idea that you're typing, the likelihood of the AI coming back and being like, calm down, John, that idea is not that good. There's 15 other competitors in the area that's doing that. Like, it's not going to do that, right? Also, like, it wants to agree with you. It wants to mirror that back, right? As like that sycophancy, like
Hmm.
failure mode, right? And then like the third is like, like is that false confidence of like when it provides a response, there's a confidence to that response that maybe you as the recipient shouldn't be l- listening to
Convinced by even, right?
in
Because
any way,
and
right? Because it
that's just
can
a
be
result
wrong.
of that's a result of just the way language fits together. Like it assembles these words in a sentence that just sounds so grounded because of the way the sequence is. It doesn't use vagaries back at you, or let's say, for example.
Like AI can be wrong, and when it's wrong, it's just as sure that it was right than when it is right, right? So
Hmm.
like it's not like, well, I'm not sure. I think this could be the way, and then you try it, and it turns out it's not the way, and it was like, well, it's not going to be like, well, like I said, I wasn't sure.
Right.
More likely, it's going to be like, this is how you do it. This is how you do it, and then you're going to
Hmm.
go and do it, and be like, that didn't work, and it'll be like, oh, that's when it'll be like, oh, okay, like I see why it didn't work now. Of course, I see why it didn't work now. It's like, no, I need you to see why it wouldn't work then, before you suggest it. So this is where like false confidence is like a real thing, and it typically doesn't it doesn't provide you with sort of like the you know uh, any sort of like lack of confidence. It never gives itself any sort of lack of confidence that it doesn't know something. It
And so
almost
that's
always tells
dangerous.
you that it does know.
It's I said the word dangerous, and like it could be actually dangerous perhaps in ways, but it
Right.
undermines the trust that we're kind of building with this tool and with this technology. So to and it could be easy to have that trust undermined and then just kind of blame it on AI and be like, AI is not as cool as everybody's talking about,
Right.
rather than reflecting on our own selves and say, well, like, how could I have asked that question differently or better? Like, what are some better ways to get feedback other than saying, what do you think about that? Right. Like, what are you actually asking when you say, so what do you think?
Well, and that's a good question. Like, what do I ask instead? Right.
Right.
And so you might want to ask, like, you might list every assumption. You might say, like, list every assumption that could be wrong with this, right? Like, you could also ask it, like, well, what would a skeptic's take be on this? Or like, what would make this sort of statement obviously wrong within 12 months? And or ask, like, what is the strongest case against this? Like, and it might be like,
The steel man, straw man. You
the
can say like
steel man,
steel man it
strong
and
man is
straw
a
man
much
it, and then you know.
exactly right. And and I think all of those things are probably better approaches to deriving your ultimate objective. That's not
Mhm.
always answers, right? It's sometimes it's like it's just an objective, like and so I think ultimately, like, getting to your like objective, this is a better approach rather than you know asking AI if you think this is a good idea, and then
Right.
AI tells you yes, and then you try and you fail.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
better to say, like, "Hey, here's my idea. Like, what would a skeptic do to like poke holes in this, and then how can we address those holes with through process?"
Right.
Might be a
No,
much better way.
it reminds me of a feature of like the basic prompt engineering or prompt discipline from back in the day 4 months ago, but, within a single session where you're already working with the agent on something and it's got all that context, you can actually use the same technique of the role and say, right now, play the part of such and such character, third person perspective or the skeptic, like you're saying, or whatever, and review everything we're talking about and give me an analysis report. And it's a little meta, I guess, but like within the role that it already is, it will take on this other role and do that and then come back out and be like, oh, cool. Like if I were the salesman, this is what I would, have to say about this idea. And then
Right.
you can actually dig in and then kind of come back out and get some pretty good contextualized feedback from the agent itself, avoiding the vagary of like, so what do you think? It's like maybe what we're saying is you got to kind of tell it what to think in order to
Yeah.
ask the
It's
question, what do you think?
what's sort of funny too is, like, as we're having this conversation, and like like my like like whatever knowledge and experience around AI is really just built on my experience of using it.
Mm,
And like, it makes me think about, like, all right, I was using it last night, and how like AI is constantly evolving. And I was working on a new idea with little
mhm.
like a business idea, which is what I usually do to like
Unwind
experiment
at
with
night.
AI. Well, even like, yeah, I feel like it's always good to have like a little project
Yeah.
when you're like, there's all these new AI tools and models and everything, and it's like, if you have nothing to do, then it's really difficult to evaluate if this tool is good or not, right?
Yeah, without using
If the
it.
new model right, is it better than the last model?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And one
yeah.
of the things I've noticed, and I have gone through and like brainstormed a million, not a million, but like many, many business ideas. And for the first time last night, as I was brainstorming a business idea, the model identified that, like, your biggest challenge isn't the technology,
Hmm.
it's people. It's going to be convincing people, the people that you need to convince to use this tool, that this is a tool that's going to help them and not replace them.
That's an abstracted thought out of a
Dude,
completely different direction, right?
come
Because 'Cause you're
on.
talking practical terms, right? I'm guessing you were designing,
And
even
when I
front
said,
end looks and
it
things and some
suggested that
functionalities.
we dig into that first.
Hmm.
And I was like, "Huh, okay." I'm like, let's dig into that." And it was like, "Great. That's your real challenge here. This other stuff, like, that's like the engineering, you'll figure that out. But like this, you need to
Mhm.
figure out. This,
Well, so
like,
that, that blurs the line of what we're talking about today because, like,
it
we need to
really
be
does, where I'm like,
wary.
well,
We
some of the stuff
we
I
need
know from my experience is already not true, even though it was true for the last 2
right,
years. What everything
right.
we've said was true, and then it's sort of
Right.
like, except my experience is telling me that, like, that's becoming less and less true. So
And like
maybe like in 6 months we'll have a episode of like why you can ask AI what it thinks now. You know,
right, right. Because now it totally gets it. And now all you need to do is say, what do you think? And it'll be fully not just
and
contextualized, but like grounded in reality, because that's what
right,
we still have. The advantage that the humans have, the human LLMs have over the LLM still is, is this real multidimensional, like grounded reality then that can allow us to think of things while the LLM is working on something to be like, wait a second, why don't you just do it like that? And in other words, I've had the LLM many times, like working really hard on something and I'm completely ignorant to tech stuff. And I'll just be like, well, can't you just do like this thing? And it's like a completely, like to me was
right.
obvious. And it goes like, oh yeah, that's exactly the easiest way to do this. But it could get stuck in a tunnel is all I'm trying to say. But if
So
the
well,
models
that's
are getting
funny.
better and better to recognize their own tunneling, well,
One of the times that uh it's okay to ask, like, what do you think?
so
And
there
that
is a
and
time that
I
it's
would
not a
say that, like,
completely
right,
illegal
is
question
when you're asking the AI to evaluate what it just told you, right?
to ask it about itself. What do you think
Yes.
about yourself? It's
What do you think about that plan? Like, you just wrote this plan, and it's like, all right, like, it is okay. It's to
mm.
ask. That's like the one time it's probably okay to ask, like, well, what do like,
Yeah,
what do you
because
think? Like,
that might be the one time where it has all of the context, because it is the creator of the context, so it must have 100% of the context. That's
right.
an interesting little loop I've never thought of.
Yeah, but I think that at the end of at we say at the end of the day all the time. I got to stop using that figure of speech. Um, but really, it's probably not a great way to be like working with your AI because it's leaving a whole lot. You're not focusing the AI enough to really provide it something like some sort of useful response to you. It's like, what exactly are
Mm,
you looking to get out of this response? Are you
yeah,
looking for someone to pat you on the back and
right.
like, because it will, like, it'll be your
100%.
mom and like tell you that like you're awesome and like that painting is
Mhm,
amazing.
yeah,
But it's like you really need to kind of like it works best when you're like extremely like pointed and focused in like what it is that you're asking for. Like if you're asking for like, what do you think? You should be asking like, what do you think of like the security architecture of my application? Or like what do you like what here's my objective, here's the plan.
hmm,
Let's think of ways to make this plan better is a way
right,
better way
right,
to
right,
frame
right.
it rather than like, what
What do
do
you
you
think
think? Because what do you think could be, its
about what?
interpretation could be like, let me this is an opportunity for me to tell John that he is very bright. Like very, very smart.
Mhm,
This is an
mhm,
excellent idea. Like, this is what he's looking for when he's asking me, what do I think? Rather than like coming at
right,
it with like a purpose and an objective of like, my objective right now is to improve upon the security of my existing application. And here's what I have. If I said, what do you think? And at that point, if it gave me no response and it just said like, I think it's great, it wouldn't be doing what I asked it. Like, it's not
or
gonna do it.
what you
Actually, or
intended to
look,
be asking it, right,
it's also not probably not going to say nothing. It might give me a suggestion that, like,
mhm,
isn't really necessary. But because I'm asking what do I think, it's probably gonna be like, what do I think is like, if we were to take this a step further, like, you would do this, So understanding like, and directing and providing pointed questions is the best way to ask it. And asking something, what do you think, is probably just too open ended to get a response back that you can have a lot of confidence in.
yeah, I think you're peeling back sort of the you're like opening the tuna can of the question, by which I mean, like, what do you think is either just totally scattershot too vague, like, or it's actually a loaded question and you intend to be asking something else and you're wrapping it in this basic, what do you think? So analyze your own mind a little bit and try to understand really what is it that you're trying to ask and then ask that,
Right.
not what do you think? And that is, I think, what that is, I think, that's what I'm understanding by like have sharper, more articulated, more
Right.
pointed questions. It's unpack your own question and break the question into questions and
It's
understand really what is it that I'm trying to do here? What is it that I'm asking?
right. And it's like, if you're asking like, here's my business plan, what do you think? Versus here's my business plan, provide me with with structured feedback and ways to improve it, are two really
Mm,
like, even though like you want the same thing,
right.
you want the same objective, right? One can be interpreted like very open ended, and one is very specific. Like I'm
Just
looking for
instructions.
I'm
That's the
looking
difference
for
between just like a question and I just gave you some instructions, right?
right,
So that's an interesting thing, an interesting way to think of questions actually taking on the role of being instructions.
right.
Uh, which could seem like they're not the same thing, right? Questions, you're looking for information, instructions, you're directing something to do something. But really, everything we're almost doing with these LLMs is giving instructions to go find me information. So it's
Right.
like the instructions are the question, and the questions are kind of the instruction, or the objectives of the questions are built into the instructions.
Well,
If
it's
that
funny
makes any
how
sense.
too, like so much of using AI well does actually boil down to like context and prompting, right? And
Yeah,
like, and at the end of the day,
it's
like,
really still the
what are we really
basics.
talking about here? Like, well, saying what do you think? It's just a shitty prompt.
It's
Like, it's
just a
just
shitty
like
prompt
it's
and
just
bad
not a
context.
very good, because it's not providing enough like direction and context to for the AI to provide any sort of like meaningful feedback.
Right, so we come all the way back really to, I think even in the first episode that we recorded, we basically just talked about, like, be articulate,
Right.
think clearly, speak well, and, these are ancient necessities that humans needed to survive and thrive, and, like, this new technology is not going to, derail humanity. It's
No,
actually calling on the deepest parts of our abilities to communicate with each other
but
that,
I also
like,
think too
are
that
gonna
it's
get
like
our best outputs.
it's so good and it's so like real. It seems so real and human, that it is, I think, easier than ever to get lulled into that sort of idea that like I can ask it what it thinks,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Without really like, without having that sort of realization of like, yeah, you still need to provide. It's still like we're still talking to a machine that doesn't have the ability to kind of infer
Mhm.
what it is that you're looking for. You need to be explicit. You still need to be explicit. You still need to be very specific about what it is that you want. And maybe again that will like change, and maybe that's like less so than it was 2 years ago, but it's, you are always looking to like get the best output out of AI, and I think that like, you know, being vague, asking just simply for an opinion without any sort of direction isn't going to lead to outcomes that's going to give you the confidence that this is a real tool that's here that can provide real value. Like, I think it's
Yeah,
easy for people to like have a bad experience to be like, "Oh, this doesn't
"No, this doesn't work. This thing sucks."
right. Well, how is this going to help me if it like can just give me the wrong answer?"
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
if you only knew how to get the right answer. So really, this is about like, how do you mitigate and, focus the AI to as best you can to give you the right answer as often as possible.
That makes me think of when I hear dog trainers say, "My job isn't actually training dogs, it's training people."
Yeah,
Like, we have to learn how to be the stewards and managers of this tool. The
right.
tool is just the tool. If you're not
Yeah,
getting good output, it's because of your input. Like
right,
100% of the time. If you don't get good
right.
output, it's because of your input. It's not because the
Don't blame
tool
the
broke
hammer,
or something.
that
Right.
your that your shed's a piece of shit, like,
Yeah,
it's not the
right.
hammer's fault, right? You just don't know how to use the hammer.
That's right.
Uh,
That's absolutely, I think, the right way to look at it. It's not even a metaphor. We're using a
right.
tool and like,
Right. It's
you
well,
know,
and it's like, right, and that's why too, like, having some just sort of domain expertise, like, you will be better at using AI in your area, in your domain expertise area, than someone who doesn't. Right? And it's like, this is
yeah.
why it's still important to have some, knowledge, but at the same time, understanding that, the power of your knowledge augmented with AI is insane. And I think people once they realize that's really when people's productivity gets unlocked with AI, and
You
that's an
just use the
exciting.
word augmented, which is literally in the word, the rag uh,
Yes.
concept. And it's interesting to think of that, right? Like your brain, your human brain, is the ultimate rag module attachment,
Right.
right,
Right.
to the model. Like,
Right.
imagine if you could bring all of your existence to the context,
Right. Your
you
experiences,
would
even like
have AGI.
right.
Like that's what's missing, maybe in AGI, is this like spherical 360 grounding in reality that we have because of 300,000 years or
Dude,
more of, development and evolution.
what an awesome conclusion to this conversation because
Yeah.
really that is the big picture here.
And that is the big picture here. And it actually does zoom down. Like, don't, what do you think right now? It's a terrible question to ask
Right.
AI. Um, that doesn't mean you can't be like wide to narrow, right? You can be vague in the beginning, but keep an eye on how you're progressing through your project, because you want to be sharpening and sharpening and sharpening and sharpening. And at some point, you break free from the part where you would ask, "What do you think?" and like stop asking those kinds of questions. Be specific,
Well,
be articulate.
it's just like getting good with the hammer.
Right.
It's like you just
Yeah.
understand how to use the hammer a little bit better, where to hold it, how to
Yeah.
swing it.
Yeah.
And as opposed to, someone with the same tool that doesn't know how to use it right, they're going to be like, I can't drive a nail with this thing. This sucks.
Right. They're
No,
just holding it sideways or something.
right.
You're
But
like, well,
you've tried one nail. I've driven 1,000 nails. Of
hmm
course, I'm better
hmm
at using the hammer. You know,
right. To the point where I understand that you tap a little bit and then a little harder and then you can pound. Like there's a dynamic to this
right?
process too,
To the
right? That's
point where
kind of
I
what I
just
mean.
one tap, bang, I'm in.
Right. Certain
Uh,
things you can do like that too.
right.
Right. Because
So
like a lot of my initial design things are start way wide, super vague,
right,
and I'm using the tool like deliberately to like chop off all of the big rough parts and then be like, okay, this is actually what I'm talking about.
right,
I didn't even know what I was talking about. I needed a sounding board and a process to get there.
right.
So those are the times where you can be like, what is your opinion? What do you think?
Well, and
Like,
like
give
those are
me
the
an
times too
idea.
where like there isn't a right answer. Like you're
Right.
just brainstorming.
Right.
So like, and it can tell you, but this is where too, like the failure module of like sycophancy, like is like,
You gotta be
where
careful
you can
there.
get in
You gotta be
trouble.
careful there. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You gotta be
Anyway,
careful.
so
All right, dude. So that was an interesting, yeah, it did pop up, I guess, in the chatter is this kind of idea of why I shouldn't ask AI what it thinks. And I don't know.
you probably shouldn't.
You probably shouldn't. What you should be asking is what do you think and why
Right.
are you asking it something?
Right.
Um, So yeah, let's wrap it up there, brother.
All right.
Everybody out there, what do we say? Like, share, and subscribe, or whatever combination of those words the LLM would choose.
Right.
Um, and
Add a
thanks for
comment and we will
yeah.
comment
Please
with
add
you.
comments. Anybody who has, we always reply. The whole spiel that people give. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you
Till
next
next
week.
week.
All right.